Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reviews, where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Tides of Chaos titled Surrender Now. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen. You can also find Tides of Chaos's music on their Spotify page, link in the description, but we're going to listen through this track today from start till finish, which I believe has released as of the 29th of February. So it'll be available at the time this video goes out, and then we're going to listen through it from start till finish. We're going to hear what we think. Let's go. What do we got? I mean, it's fascinating with the dynamic range off the bat with the slow build. Distorted guitar, interesting wood instruments, keys. Pretty ferocious off the bat, to be honest. Fantastic range with the drum fills. And the whispered vocal, should I say, they're a nice touch. Iterating the hook line.
Yield to the power in possession. Let it devour your emptiness. Just a shell so frail. Bound down to me, let your own self.
Really comfortable in that low end. I mean, it's just those gradual kind of, well, not gradual actually, they are very quick. Those quick shifts between parts to keep the listener's attention, whilst also demonstrating ranges and chord progressions, intensities of instrumental layers.
Never-ending streams of whispers inside your head. Inner fire, great desires, worn by fearfulness and agony. In faith you must trust out to me.
It's ferocious in the stereo field, really nice and wide, surrounds you. And the vocals are wonderfully visceral with the technique there with the triplet 16ths. Fantastic bit of tension there. The strings and the synth pads with a bit of a chorus effect or something like that are really just fascinating, you know. Nice to have the bass accented there too. And just those pick slides there, transcending or transferring to a new section there, a nice way of splitting up a solo section. Sort of sadistic sounding harmonies with those guitars there with the intervals. And a hell of a kick with the rhythm delay tails on the end for sure. It just had a phenomenal way of ending. It really feels like something is missing now that we don't have the consistency of those various instruments within the mix. It was a complex track instrumentally in regards to its layering, even when there was less rather than more. The vocals were tight. I think I kind of know what the story is about, so let's talk about that more in the conclusion. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Tides of Chaos, titled Surrender Now, which again will be released on the 29th of February, so it'll be out by the time you're watching this, if it hasn't been shown before, if this video hasn't been shown before. I think that it's great. Honestly, like overall, I can't really hear anything that was particularly egregious. There's a lot of positives with my feelings about this track and what was presented. I'll go through it in my usual way where, I start what I think the track is about. I think it's about like the way that it's sung and whispered and growled. I think it's about someone telling you to submit, to surrender to whatever is trying to sort of possess or take over you, submit or surrender to the powers that be that are going to overwhelm you, to give in to temptation potentially, just basically to not fight against it. It's just kind of to give into it, to cave. And I think that that's an interesting title. Like when I think about the genre of music that we're trying to make here, it is kind of metal to talk about the overwhelming force of, like, say, demons. So I'm just looking at the cover. If I remove myself from them, you can see the album cover and you've got like all the demons and like Vorpal wolves and stuff like that, Maybe that's the door you have to surrender and to go through the door or something like that. It makes you think about it. That's kind of why I appreciate art from music, because it kind of helps you maybe understand a perspective of the lyrics that you might not have initially intentioned. But, the story is compelling. I'm sure if I had a couple more listens to it, I'd be able to sort of tighten up a little bit of nuance and get a bit more sort of definition on it. But at the same time, I'm very happy with what I heard, and I thought it was an interesting story from what I could tell. I think what really sold that experience was the way that from the start, the vocals were whispered. They were kind of like quiet, and you kind of had to pay very close attention to it. It was like thoughts kind of whispering that was crawling through your eardrums, etc. Like it was that kind of vibe. It was very creepy and uncomfortable. But again, considering the style of music we're doing, it's par for the course. And it's honestly cool. I really appreciate the way we kind of made it a dramatic performance rather than just telling someone or even singing it. The extra kind of sort of bits of recordings that were on various sides of the stereo field were great because I surrounded you in the headphones. It's nice to make use of the stereo field. When there were lower range clean parts there, he explored his chest voice quite a lot. We didn't necessarily go into the head voice much, which I kind of appreciate. There was a lot of brightness with some of the synth and guitar parts, so I don't necessarily think it would have benefited us to have used that much of the mid to highs vocally. I'm glad that we stuck in a range that we're comfortable with, and the notes that we chose worked well with some of the Phrygian modes and minor chords that we had within the harmonies. The growls were sung tremendously as well. Like, there was just fantastic technique, and it was really authentic for the genre. We knew the kind of almost sort of black metalish approach we wanted to take within this. We had tritones and uncomfortable passages with like the synths and the keys and the bass and drums and guitar, creating this interesting aesthetic that I'll talk about when we get to those. But I think that if we think about the story that was told, having the growled screened parts there, that kind of manic, that kind of oppression there with the, gradually, crescendos into that, with the verse being the clean part before that. I just like the mixture of different ways we approached, and I thought it suits the genre well and also makes the story more interesting to listen to. A lot of those styles also niched really nicely within the track itself, where at 5 minutes you kind of need stuff like different vocal takes to kind of allow a track that long to kind of be intriguing and interesting the entire way through. I do enjoy the fact that we didn't just have verse, chorus. We did have a couple of solo sections. We had interesting instrumental intro and outros there with various grooves, their ways of approaching the drums, the guitars. Even some parts we didn't have any drums at all. Again, we had the keys. We had variations of the different total amount of instrumental layers within it. We had recognizable sort of quote unquote hooks, but we also weren't afraid to allow other lead elements to overtake the vocals and provide a sense of sophistication there. If I talk about a few of the instruments I really appreciated, I thought that, given the quite, it was a complex track in regards to how it was done. There was like an A, a B, a C, a D, an E section, etc. The guitars were fantastic throughout. We had some sort of alternate picked string parts. There were some melodies, some harmonies there. We were comfortable with our power chords and the chug chugs on those too. We knew not to have them all the time. It's like with like some parts where, for instance, the bass is more prominent. Occasionally, we had a bit of slap bass there that I could hear, like some octave movements there, where the bass otherwise kind of stuck around the root notes and was very supportive in that low end. But those lead guitar parts we had later on there, with the harmonized solo coming in soon afterwards, it's just tremendous. I like the fact it didn't stick to natural major or minor scales either. We weren't afraid to go into some uncomfortable sort of tritone or like diminished sections. And we didn't overcomplicate the guitar parts either. We can clearly play, but we also have the self-awareness, I think, to understand that it's more about the atmosphere that's being created by music rather than how well we can play. So I liked the organic nature of the performance. There was a great chemistry between the guitar and bass parts, let alone everything else. And ultimately, I thought that considering that we had one main sort of chord progression throughout, it was savage enough with the different approaches within that. The keys that we had, like in the, sort of closer to the intro part of the track there, which are more sort of octaves and not necessarily trying to be too exotic, were great for tension and drama, and just it was very kind of like, oof, what's happening here when they came in. We understand the fundamentals of music theory and composition here, and we understand that if you're going to introduce something and you want it to kind of hit, you need it to hit hard, and we managed to get that put in there in a way that was very considerate of the other elements within the mix. It was basically part of the tapestry, almost a minor part, but still nonetheless very important. There was some interesting kind of fluttery kind of woodwinds, or like sort of, how do I describe it, some higher melodies at the start that kind of fluttered, and then we had other kind of cool responses to that. We had some sort of string and synthy parts as well that murmured in the background there and created a sense of resonance in the mid to high range, was also adding a bit of sort of like mystery and mistiness to it. Things weren't too sort of raw and dry sounding. They had a kind of interesting sense of lushness to it, despite the definition that we had with those drum grooves. I mean, the drums were absolutely phenomenal, man. I loved not only the consistency with the single and double kicks, also had some wonderful 16th and sort of 16th triplet drum fills cascading on those tails of some of the sections transferring to others. And again, we knew not to have the drums all the time. It was simply a case where I think we were very competent in the instruments we played. But even with the drums, with how technical some of those parts were, we didn't overplay them. And I enjoy that, because if you have a lot, even if it's an instrument mostly, even if it's like an instrumental part, if you overcook one instrument away, which doesn't make sense with the story, or it isn't necessarily, like, there's 101 things that can go wrong when you overplay. I'm glad that we found a kind of a weird way to pocket, whilst also nonetheless allowing ourselves to show proficiency across the spectrum. It was just give and take with, again, variety and dynamic range and intensities throughout. But I think that's a lot of the instruments I appreciated there. We had a sense, like there was not just the same way of playing with rhythms and stuff like that as well. They adjusted the different grooves. There were even some parts like in the solo section where we kind of went into some like sort of dotted eighths or something like that. The groove and the vibe shifted there. We weren't afraid to go between we weren't afraid to step away from the quarter note accents. And combining that with the sort of kind of feral sounding chords we had at some parts, where they were very uncomfortable triads unless you were familiar with the music or understood the context, the lyrics and stuff like that. The lead parts sounded like they were festering in the ether of everything, in a way that I think is positive. That's not me being derogatory. They had a kind of real sort of ferocity to them. And the variety of different approaches to that same idea still left it feeling like one where we were sort of like in the end days and we didn't know if we were going to escape. Again, it's because we resolved to that minor boom, boom, boom. It's just that kind of death march there, that kind of walk towards your doom. It's a very simple bass line. But again, it's the different ways we approached it that made it, more than palatable at the 5-minute mark. And the extra bit of oomph at the end, that was the last time we went through this sort of urge to being surrendered. It's that we had that theme kind of hinted at the start, and we gradually got to the top of the mountain, and then we sort of had to jump off. The various layers added complexity to the overall harmony, but I think we still managed to find a way to make it sort of like be consistent with the movement there, that we could follow the track more easily because of that. And when I think of the lyrics, the themes make sense, the chord choices and stuff like that. I'm glad that we didn't just have like one section with the same instruments the whole time. We varied our intensities and had some bigger and some lower there to kind of make things more kind of engaging. And I don't think there was a note out of place. It was just a really solid performance. I think a lot of it was done live, which I appreciate. It wasn't sterilized. It was great. I could imagine this being pretty sick live. The studio recording, mixing and mastering was fantastic. I'm really glad that we approached things the way we did there. You know, like I need to listen through it through different monitors to sort of check some of the mid and low range sort of resonances, but for the most part I'm really stoked with how heavy it was. The vocals, guitars, keys, synths, bass, drums, everything else found a position within the stereo field, as well as the frequency spectrum. There are little to no resonant frequencies that I could hear. Again, I think we just wanted a bit of oomph to the recording in general, and when we didn't, we sort of took away those little elements there to allow things to sort of float as a contrast. There was dynamic range to it. Things are not the same loudness all the time. And I think, again, with the start there, we're kind of coming up very kind of slowly and take our time to reach the high point of that part. I think that was clever because it was like, it creates like a sense of curiosity, you know, why are we taking this long when a lot of tracks are kind of a little bit kind of cautious about having 10 seconds where things don't kind of grab your attention. Why is it that this song is wanting to take our time? And it's because the wait is worth it. But it was nice to know without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting was handled, you know. It's great. It's a fantastic song. I enjoyed my time with it. I thought my favorite parts were the vocals and the instrumental performances. And this is my review of this track from an act named Tides of Chaos, titled Surrender Now. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever thought of crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP reviews. Spiderhands Out.